Good morning. In the last class, we were discussing about the three additional forms of signaling which are used to overcome the disadvantages of bipolar signaling scheme. So remember, the bipolar signaling scheme we said is very efficient to be used in many transmitter receiver systems because of its power spectral density curve, which has two great advantages. One is it does not have any DC components and its power level or the power spectral density at zero frequency is zero. And the other important parameter is the bandwidth requirement, which is just 1 by TB. So because of these two main advantages, the bipolar signaling format is commonly used other than the Manchester format. Manchester format, though, doesn't have any synchronization problem. It has a problem of needing additional bandwidth. So because of this, we said bipolar is commonly used, but bipolar has one main disadvantage, that is the timing information or synchronization at the receiver becomes difficult. So how can the receiver get synchronized to the transmitter? It's it is possible in normal operation when there are equal number of ones and zeros, but when the distribution of the data is such that there is a long sequence of zeros. Remember, in bipolar format, zeros are transmitted as zero voltages. So whenever there is a long sequence of zeros, it becomes difficult to perform synchronization of the receiver clock to that of the transmitter's clock. So timing synchronization becomes a big headache when there is a long sequence of zeros and we are doing bipolar signaling. So in that case, we have two different methods which will help us in improving our signaling scheme or improving the synchronization function of the receiver. One is known as the high density bipolar signaling, or HDB, N we call it as, where N tells us after how many consecutive zeros, if how many consecutive zeros are there in the message, I will have to use a replacement. So what we do in these new signaling formats, we'll use a replacement bit pattern whenever there is a long sequence of zeros. And that replacement pattern is decided based on some parameters which we have listed. How the replacement is done, we have listed in the table. So usually what are the other one is BNZS, and what are the important parameters to be considered? If the number of zeros in the binary input data is greater than n, then replace those zeros with a special binary sequence. How do we choose the sequences? They are chosen to include binary ones to improve the timing content of the signal. And the special sequence chosen will deliberately violate the bipolar rule. So what do I mean by violate? In bipolar rule, ones are represented with alternate voltage levels. So whenever I have ones, I'll be representing them with alternate voltage levels. But if I'm going to use a replacement pattern to overcome a sequence of zero, in that replacement pattern, I will wantedly violate this bipolar rule. We saw HDB3 as an example. In HDB3, we could use either the pattern 000V or B00V. Usually here B represents a binary 1, I told you, and this V represents a voltage level of either positive or negative value. So when I say HDB3, if there are 3 plus 1, n plus 1 zeros, 4 zeros, then I will have to replace with one of these patterns. And when do I use the first pattern 000V? I'll use the first pattern when I count how many ones have occurred since my last substitution. So after doing one substitution, you count how many ones have occurred in the input data. If the number of ones are odd, then you will replace the 4 zeros with this pattern 000V. And when you count the number of ones, for example, we had considered examples. Say the last substitution happened here. I had 4 zeros and I substituted with something like this. After the last substitution, we are going to check how many ones are there. Okay, see, for example, this was your last substitution. After that, you would count, you'll check when the next set of 4 zeros come. The next set of 4 zeros have occurred here. And before this 4 zeros, how many ones have occurred? I should see after the last substitution. How many ones have occurred? 3 ones have occurred, which means it is an odd number. So if there are 3 ones, 1, 2, 3, you have an odd number of ones. So the coming set of 4 zeros will be replaced with this pattern, that is 000V. Okay. Similarly, say I have another 4 zeros or 5 zero pattern here, and this is my last substitution. Now, before this occurrence of 4 zeros, again you count how many ones are there. It is 1, 2, 3, 4. This was your last substitution now. And by the time the next substitution arrives, you see how many ones are there. There are 4 ones. 4 ones means I should replace this. It's an even number. So with which pattern? I should replace it with the pattern B00V. So these 4 zeros should be replaced with this pattern. So this is how we decide whether you should replace with this pattern or this pattern. And along with that, we have one more condition. That is, what is the voltage level of the preceding pulse? If your preceding pulse was represented with a negative voltage level, that is below 0, then this pattern will become 000 minus, because I want to violate the bipolar rule. According to bipolar rule, if the previous pulse was negative, the next pulse should have been positive. But here I am going to keep it negative just to violate that rule, bipolar rule, and show to the receiver that this is a replacement for 4 zeros. So just to show to the receiver that this was a replacement for 4 zeros, we will violate the rule. And I have included a 1 here, helping me to achieve timing synchronization well at the receiver. And if the preceding pulse was positive, I'll replace here this pattern with 000 plus. Similarly, for even number of ones, B00V was the representation. In that also, if the preceding pulse is negative, we'll replace these bit values with plus 00 plus positive voltages, again violating the rule. 2 alternate ones are represented with the same voltage level. And if the preceding pulse was positive, we'll represent minus 00 minus. We had taken example and seen the working of this. Any doubts with that? Do you have any doubts with HDB3?
No.
Okay then. And BNZS was the second type of replacement signaling format, which would overcome the deficiency of bipolar signaling. As the name indicates, it says binary with N0 substitution. Binary with N0 substitution is the full form of BNZS signaling. So this is BNZS signaling. Here each string of N zeros in the input data, each string of N zeros in the input data is encoded with a special binary pattern which will include a few ones to help timing recovery at the receiver. And the best example again is B3ZS, where N value is 3. Here BNZS, N value is 3. That means every set of 3 zeros in the input sequence, every set of 3 zeros in the input sequence will be replaced with a special 3-bit binary pattern. And here also how we are going to do the replacement. Just like in the previous case, we have two formats. If the number of ones since the last substitution have been odd, then I will use the format 00V. And if the number of ones since the last substitution was even, then I will use the pattern B0V. So this is 00V and B0V. This is how we use the substitution patterns. And again, based on the preceding pulse, if it was negative, then the replacement pattern will be 00 minus, so that the bipolar rule is violated. Two negative pulses we are using consecutively. And if it was positive, then 00 plus. Again, for even number of ones, the replacement, if the preceding pulse was negative, will be plus 0 plus and minus 0 minus when the preceding pulse was positive. So that's how we considered and we did the example. Then I was telling you before the end of the class that we can have B6ZS and B8ZS, all that we have. Here B6ZS is there in our syllabus, B8ZS is not there. So what does this B6ZS mean? If you have 6 consecutive zeros, whenever you have 6 consecutive zeros in the input binary data, then you will replace it with a special pattern. And B8ZS means if you have 8 consecutive zeros in the input pattern, then you will replace it with a special pattern. Anyway, B6ZS is there in our syllabus. These things can be asked for 4 to 5 marks, short notes. So B6ZS means a string of 6 zeros, 6 consecutive zeros. Remember that they should be consecutive, one after the other, will be replaced by a special binary pattern 0V, B0, VB. This is the binary pattern which we use for replacement. And here, luckily, you need not monitor how many ones are there since your last substitution, because I have only one pattern. Unlike in the B3ZS or HDB3, I don't have two different patterns for replacement. I have only one pattern, that is 0V, B0, VB. As the number of bits to be replaced increases, the pattern becomes bigger. So we won't be monitoring number of ones since last substitution and all that. Since we'll have only one replacement pattern, I just have to see what is the polarity of the preceding pulse. If the preceding pulse was negative, then this 0V, B0, VB becomes something like this. 0 minus plus 0 plus minus. It is a bit difficult, but you'll have to remember this. They can ask problems also. And if the preceding bit value, signal value was positive, positive means above 0 like this, plus A. And negative means like this, minus A. So if the signaling level was positive for the preceding pulse, the replacement pattern will be 0 plus minus. So you see the first one will automatically When you have a plus, the next one should have been a minus, but you're still using a plus, which means you're going to violate the bipolar rule. So these two successive ones are having same what? Same voltage level, indicating a violation in bipolar rule. That shows a violation in bipolar rule. And the other things will depend on the initial. So if this is a plus, then I have a minus, then I have a 0, and again you have a V, which will be a minus, and finally a B. So this is how we represent. Let's just take one example and see. You'll have to remember these substitutions. Say in this example, this is the bit pattern. I have a 1 first and the preceding pulse was positive. So this 1 will be represented with a negative value. Yes or no? Bipolar means that's the rule. If the preceding value was positive, the next one should be negative. And now I have 6 consecutive zeros. So I should replace it with either this first one or the second one. And what tells me which one I should use? The preceding pulse amplitude level. If the preceding pulse was negative, here it is negative, the preceding pulse is negative. So if the preceding pulse was negative, I should use this bit pattern, 0 minus plus 0 plus minus. So these 6 bits will be replaced with these 6 bits because we have the preceding pulse as a negative value. Okay, and then you have a 1. Since this value was minus, bipolar rule tells me for 1 I should represent it with plus, and again 0 is represented with 0 volts. The next one is represented with a negative, the next one with a positive, like that. Alternately, you will be writing positive, negative for normal ones in the data. Now again I am seeing 6 zeros. So whenever you count 6 zeros, you have to replace it with one of these bit patterns. The bit pattern which I have to use here depends on the previous or preceding pulse. What is the amplitude of the preceding pulse? It's a positive value. So whenever it's a positive value, the replacement is 0 plus minus 0 minus plus. So this would be the replacement value depending on the preceding pulse. And again, the bipolar rule continues for normal data. Since this ended with a plus, next I will have minus, the next one plus. Again, a set of 6 zeros. Look at the previous preceding pulse. It was a plus. So the replacement is 0 plus minus, 0 minus plus. So this is how we do it's simple. Here I need not even worry about counting how many ones are there after my last substitution. I directly have to look at the preceding pulse and put the substitution. That's it. This completes module 1. Is signaling over AWGN channels. What does AWGN stand for? What does AWGN stand for? Yes? In PCS you have studied. What is AWGN? Additive
White Gaussian noise.
Additive white Gaussian noise. And in the channels, if we consider only additive noise, then we'll be talking about additive white Gaussian noise and how that noise affects the signals which is traveling over a channel. So when I have a signal being sent over a channel and that channel is affected with additive white Gaussian noise, what type of signaling I should do? How should I choose the input signals? What type of input signals I can use to minimize the effect of noise? Remember, noise is not under our control. It will surely occur in channels. We can only hope to minimize its effect or try to overcome its effect at the receiver. So what type of signaling we should do in order to minimize the effect of additive white Gaussian noise on the signal? So we'll be talking about geometric representation of signals, and that uses a procedure known as Gram-Schmidt orthogonalization procedure, which tells us how I can represent every message signal as a vector. Every message signal will be represented as a vector of n values, okay? And how those n values in the vector, sum of n values in a vector, how they will be orthogonal to each other. So we call that kind of representation for every message by using a special procedure called Gram-Schmidt orthogonalization procedure. So as I told you, it's basically how to represent the signals. So we consider discrete signals and how to represent them so that they'll be orthogonal to each other. What is the geometric representation? We use the signal space diagram, also known as the constellation diagram. So we write something called as the constellation diagram or the signal space diagram. I think you have seen this in your lab. If you have started with this one, I think you would have started with your simulation, right? So the constellation diagrams you would have observed, it is a signal space representation of or a vector space representation of signals. So we consider that geometric representation for various signals, the equations using the Gram-Schmidt procedure, then conversion of this continuous AWGN channel into a vector channel. So how we can represent this channel using vectors, and then we'll move on to receivers. So what are the things we do at the transmitting end and at the channel? And then when we move on to receivers, we'll study what is the best way in which I can receive the signal in spite of noise. In spite of noise affecting the signal, what is the best way in which the signal can be received using maximum likelihood decoding. ML stands for maximum likelihood decoding. We also study something known as correlation receiver and matched filter receivers. So basically here we'll be checking about what type of signals or what type of signaling we should do to transmit efficiently, how we should choose the signals. A good choice of the signals which we send to represent the data will help us in minimizing the effect of noise. Please remember, if you choose the signals which will uh, represent the binary data when you're transmitting them over a noisy channel, the good choice of signals will enable us to minimize the effect of noise. That's why a good choice of signals is essential. That is the initial part which happens at the transmitting end. At the receiving end, we'll see, in spite of that, when noise has affected a signal, how to recover the signal efficiently. So for all this, we'll be doing the mathematical analysis. So detailed mathematical analysis of how a signal should be represented mathematically so that it minimizes noise effects, and then how it should be received, how the filter should be designed, or how the receiver should be designed to receive a noisy signal properly. All that we are going to see in this module. So let me just consider a typical digital communication system. A typical digital communication system. Let me call this as the transmitter. In that, one part can be modulator, The other one can be vector transmitter, modulator and vector transmitter. Here you have the channel. Naturally, noise gets added to the channel, and we are going to consider only additive white Gaussian noise. And here I should have the opposite of what we had at the transmitter. This is the receiving end. So naturally I should have what? This can be the detector or demodulator. You can call it as demodulator or detector. And this will be, this was the vector transmitter. So here I'll call it as the vector receiver. I'm going to convert the message signals in vector format. That's why I'm naming them as vector transmitter and vector receiver. And whatever I have here, that should be the destination where you will have an estimate of transmitted symbol. So let me name the symbols. Let me say this message source. Okay, here it will generate the message in the form MI. I'll name the message bits as MI or the binary message as MI. The output of this vector transmitter can be called as SI. Okay, where SI represents a vector for every message. If I have M messages, so if I have M messages in the form MI, each and every message will be represented with a vector. So every vector here in this case, this I varies from 1 to N. In this case, here this I varies from 1 to M. Later on, we'll call this as I and J. Here we have just represented like this. Now, after the modulator, I'll be converting this signal as a function of time. So I can call this as SI of t. This vector will be converted as a function of time. So you will be using sines and cosines. Remember, after modulation, sinusoids will be representing the signal levels. So we'll have that as a function of time. And at the receiver, as usual, you will get back a signal. Let me say you will be able to get back a signal X. And here, after the vector receiver, here you should estimate the message which was transmitted. If MI was transmitted, let me say, I'll get an estimate of that message MI cap. Okay. We'll assume that estimate should be as close to MI, or it should be the same as MI. Then we'll say the probability of error is 0. Okay. If, let me say, if MI cap is equal to MI, then probability of error would be 0. And if MI cap is not equal to MI, then PE will be existing. There will be some PE, probability of error. And with how much we'll say there is error and how many times the error is there, that will tell us the actual probability. Anyway, we'll be determining that. So here you can just assume the message source will be discrete in nature. Please remember, this is a discrete message source. This vector transmitter will produce a sequence Si of n numbers. I was telling you this I varies from 1 to n. It will produce a sequence Si of n numbers, okay, and which is nothing but a vector. How do those numbers be? Like I can say, for example, Si1, Si2, something like this, Sin, okay. So every Si can be represented as a sequence of n numbers, and this sequence of n numbers will be written in the form of a vector. That's why we call this as the vector transmitter. Okay. And the modulator will then, what it will do? It will convert every vector Si. Each of these vectors Si is converted into a continuous finite energy signal Si of t. So remember, I told you it will convert each of these vectors into some signals which are functions of time. So each of these are called the finite energy signals. Just to write all this in words, I'm telling you, in the notes I'll give. Here I'll not write the whole thing. It's only a explanation of this block diagram. You just have to understand what each of these symbols mean. So Si of t is a sequence of continuous finite energy signals where each signal will be represented in the interval 0 to capital T, where we say T can be the time period of the signal. Okay, time period of the original bit in the binary message or whatever it is. Channel noise, as usual, is additive white Gaussian noise. And at the receiver end, the detector will help us, detector or demodulator will help us to detect this Si, whatever Si is coming after noise, Si plus AWGN. From that we try to extract Si, and once you try to extract Si here, you have to convert that Si back to the vector representation Si1, Si2, so on, Sin. And remember, I should use caps here. All this, once it is done, from this vector, I'll try to estimate or detect whether this vector represents a binary 1 or a 0. What type of message does it represent? That is known as estimation, detection and estimation of the message. So we'll be doing detection and estimation of the message at the receiver side, and at the transmitter side we will be trying to understand which signals should be used to transmit well in the presence of AWGN in a channel. Okay. So this is the representation I can use. Now you can just say, consider the message source. Consider the message source. Let's say to have M alphabets. Remember, in ITC also we used to consider like this. So the message source Mi is considered to have M alphabets. Okay. And let the denoted as, how do I denote the message signal symbols? M1, M2, so on, MM. So M alphabets means I'll represent each of the individual messages like this: M1, M2, MM. Okay. Now the source emits, let's say M symbols. Source emits M symbols every t seconds. So for every t seconds, it's going to emit M symbols, let's assume. And let's say all symbols are emitted with equal probability. Let's say all symbols occur with equal probability. It's not that it's not a Markov source. Okay, it's a zero memory source. We are considering this as a zero memory source as per our ITC what we spoke. Okay. Let's say the probability of occurrence of message symbol MI will then be 1 divided by the total number of message symbols possible. We said there are M message symbols possible, M1 to MM, right? M1, M2 till MM. And the probability of occurrence of each symbol can be written as 1 by M, capital M, where I ranges from 1 to, remember, M1, M2, M3. So the I value can be something like this. Let me call this equation 1. Okay. Now, the output of the vector transmitter. The next unit there is the vector transmitter. The output of the vector transmitter will be a vector of real numbers. Let me say it consists of a vector of real numbers, and the vector value Si can be represented as S. Okay. So initially the message source will output discrete messages in the form MI, where I ranges from 1 to capital M, and the probability of occurrence of each message symbol will be equal to 1 by M. And then this is passed on to a vector transmitter. This vector transmitter converts each of these message symbols into a vector of n dimension, or it converts every message into a n dimensional vector. Okay, so it converts it into an n dimensional vector like this as shown, and depending on how many which message symbol, every message symbol will be represented with an n dimensional vector. And here you should remember one thing, note this capital N should always be less than capital M. Okay. So dimension of the vector which we use to represent the message should always be less than the number of message symbols. Please remember that. So next what happens? This is input to the modulator. This is input to the modulator. Which will construct or build, I can say, which will construct a finite energy signal, a unique, let's say a unique or distinct finite energy signal Si of t of duration, I told you this, of duration t seconds. So for every message, for every Mi value, it will be represented with an n-dimensional vector Si, and this will be, each will be represented with a finite energy signal which is a function of time, and which will exist for a duration of t seconds. So if the message bit exists for a duration of t or tb seconds, this signal si of t in time domain will also, I told you it will generally be a sine or cosine. Even that exists for t seconds. Okay, capital T is the time period or the bit duration, I can say. And the energy in the signal Si of t is what? How do we represent energy? It is what? The area under the square of the signal. Yes or no? Integral 0 to t Si square t dt, where I value varies between 1 to capital M. So this would be the energy in the signal after the modulator. So here after modulator, we represent this Si with finite energy time domain signals like sines and cosines, and all these signals will have finite energy whose energy is determined like this. Okay. So remember, next the signal travels through the channel where it's affected with additive white Gaussian noise. So let's say this additive white Gaussian noise affects the signal. So usually what we would do, how would we represent white noise? Remember, we would represent white noise as W of t. In PCS we did that. Here also we'll do. Therefore, the received signal, let me say the received signal. Now I am coming to the receiver side. X of t is a sample function of the random signal or random process X of t. How do I represent that random process? I'll represent the received signal as a random process, capital X of t, which includes the transmitted signal Si of t and the white noise. So received signal is represented as a random signal X of t or a random process X of t, which gives me the summation of the received or the transmitted signal. This was the signal transmitted along with the addition of the white noise process. So the white noise is added here. Therefore, if this is a random process, we called X of t as a random process. Therefore, the received signal is the sample function of this random process, which will be, I can write it as small x of t is small si of t plus small w of t is a sample function. It's the same equation, but I'm just taking, it's a minimized form of this complete process of the random process that represents the channel and receiver. So it represents the channel and received signal. So I'll just consider it like this. Say for example, I have a transmitted signal Si of t, and this is the channel. This is the channel area. In this channel area, I can call this as AWGN channel. And here white noise gets added to the channel, and Here I have the received signal small x of t, which is the sum of transmitted signal and the white noise. Okay. So what does the receiver basically do? Please understand, I can't write the whole thing. Whatever I explained here, I'll repeat. The receiver will, what will it do? It is going to observe the received signal x of t. So if I have the received signal x of t, it's going to observe that received signal for one symbol duration in the interval 0 to t. It's going to observe that received signal, and then it will generate an observation vector x. So this x is known as the observation vector. So instead of this SI, we'll call it as the observation vector SI. After observing the received symbol x of t for 1 bit duration 0 to t. So observe the received symbol for 1 bit duration. Okay. And from that it will generate the observation vector x, small x. And for this, then this vector receiver will have say some earlier knowledge of what were the signal vectors SI. It would have known what were the signal vectors SI and its corresponding probabilities of the message vector MI, the probability of this, the signal vectors, all that partial knowledge of all this, along with the observation vector X. It should be able to get an estimate of the received signal, whether the received signal should be matching that of the transmitted symbol. It will generate a proper estimate. That's why we call this as an detection and estimation function. The receiver usually is a detection and estimation function. Okay. So please remember, this is the basic functionality. And before going to this Gram-Schmidt orthogonalization procedure, let us review a little bit of the vector space concept. You have studied all this. So very quickly, in 5 minutes, let me try to review how much ever is possible. We'll be using all this extensively in this module. Okay. So this vector space concept, basics of signal space, inner product, what is norm, okay, orthogonality, energy in the signals, Euclidean distance between two signals, how do we form orthonormal basis functions, vector representation, and the signal space summary. These are the things needed. So basically, what is a signal space? If I represent any signal S of t using a set of vectors S1, S2, S3, so on, then I'll call this region as the signal space. What are the operations which can be performed on the signal space? You can perform inner product, which is similar to a correlation operation. You can find the norm of the signal, which is nothing but equivalent to finding energy in the signal. You can check and represent orthogonality. You can find the Euclidean distance between two elements of a signal space or two vectors, and you can form an orthogonal basis function, which will be a sum of such orthonormal signals. So if I'm able to find a set of well-suited signals which exist in the signal space, I will combine those signals in the form of a linear equation. Anyway, so just to consider signal S of t, if this signal S of t is 0 for t less than 0, and it is represented by something like this for t. So the signal is represented like this. And how am I writing the equation? I'm just saying this doesn't represent any specific function. So I'll just say S of t is 0 whenever t is less than 0 and whenever t is greater than t. Okay. So there are two ways in which we can define. The simplest way is, since I'm not able to define the shape of this signal, it's not sinusoidal, it's not cosine, it's not ramp, I don't have a specific shape. So what I'll say, there is a signal S of t whose value is 0 before time t is equal to 0 and after time t is equal to t, where capital T represents the time duration or the time period of the signal. So I'm just considering an arbitrary signal. Okay, any arbitrary signal in the duration 0 to t. How do I determine the energy in this signal? It is nothing but integral 0 to the duration of time t, s square of t dt, and this will be an energy signal if it has finite energy, if its energy level is less than infinity. Please remember all this. Nobody will tell you all these fundamental requirements. Though it is taking us some additional time, I just want to brief up these concepts before we go into the actual topics where we will be using all these concepts extensively. So when I say inner product, you should easily be able to recollect this. Okay. So what do we have here? What do we call as inner product? We represent inner product of two signals, x of t and y of t, like this. X of t comma y of t, their inner product is equivalent to the actual product of the two signals, x of t into y of t, integrated over one bit duration or one time period 0 to t dt. The same equation if I represent as vectors. See, if x is a vector and y is another vector, as you can see, okay, and the angle between these two vectors is theta. How do I write the inner product of two vectors? The dot product. It's also called the dot product of two vectors. So x dot y is nothing but x into y, the product of vector x into vector y, cos of theta, because the angle between those two is theta. So writing inner product of two signals x of t into y of t is exactly similar to the dot product of the two vectors x and y. So if x is one vector and y is another vector, how we represent the dot product? Something similar to that is the inner product or dot product. Please remember, this inner product or dot product is also known as what? Correlation. This also represents the correlation between the two signals. Please remember that. Okay. Finding inner product is telling I am finding the correlation between the two separate signals. Example. See, the first signal which I have here is represented as a square wave whose value is plus a. Sorry. The value of this signal is plus a from 0 to t by 2 and minus a from t by 2 to t. The second signal has value a by 2 from 0 to t by 2. So like this. How do you find the inner product or dot product? Just multiply these two directly. So this is a into a by 2 for which duration? For the duration t by 2. So the parts a into a by 2 multiplied with t by 2 plus the second half is minus a into 2a. See, the first signal is minus a, the second signal is 2a, And again, this exists for a time duration t by 2. So if I find this, I'm going to get minus 3 by 4 a square t. This gives me the correlation between the two signals, also known as the inner product of the two signals. Okay. So I think we'll stop here. The norm or energy level of a signal can be represented. Since you're familiar with these, how do I represent the norm or the energy level in the signal? It is represented as the square of the signal, magnitude of the signal. It is the square of the magnitude of the signal, or it is like finding the inner product of the signal with itself. Finding the correlation of the signal with itself or inner product of the signal with itself, we call that as the norm function, and that norm function is a representation of energy in the signal. So how do I represent the energy Ex? It is the inner product of the signal integrated from 0 to t x square t dt. Okay. So what is the value of the norm x of t? It is square root of energy in the signal. So we are not interested in finding x of t whole square. I am interested in finding the norm value is just x of t. It should be root of the energy. Okay. So root of the energy in the signal is this. As a vector, it can be represented like this. So you just have a look at the example also. Example, a cosine signal is considered. And how do I find the norm of a cosine signal? Root of its energy. How do I represent this cosine signal? A cos 2 pi t by t, where capital T represents the time period. Square of that I should take to find the energy. And to find the norm, I should take square root of energy. I'll get this value.